What's up, everybody? If you want to join the greatest online Star Wars community, the Fandom Menace, make sure you hit that subscribe button before today's video starts, so you don't miss out on any updates and you're always the first to know when our newest videos go live.
The following is a world-class Bullshitters exclusive.
2019 was the year of Marvel. April saw the release of Avengers Endgame, which went on to become the biggest film in history. The other two theatrical releases from Marvel, Spider-Man Far From Home and Captain Marvel, also broke records by crossing the billion-dollar mark. So, in a year of major wins for Marvel Studios, why are Marvel fans worried about the bleak future that lies ahead? Why are they convinced that the Marvel brand has peaked and the rest of the MCU will suffer a major decline in quality? Well, it's a complicated answer. There are multiple reasons, and today we're going to take a deep look at one of them. So sit back and get ready while we take a closer look at the Marvel problem. Before we can discuss the Marvel problem, we have to figure out why Marvel is so popular with so many people. Is it because it's a well-marketed property owned by one of the biggest entertainment companies in the world? Possibly. But Marvel became a household name synonymous with great characters decades before Disney came sniffing around like a pack of ravening wolves. The real reason Marvel was able to elevate itself from its humble beginnings was because Marvel is the modern-day myth. If you found this video and you don't know what a myth is, well, it's a folklore genre consisting of narratives and stories that play a fundamental role in society, such as foundational tales or origin myths. The main characters in the myths are usually gods, demigods, or supernatural humans. I don't know about you, but that sounds an awful lot like a comic book to me. We have characters that are gods, demigods, or supernatural humans that all have origin stories of their own. Myths are important to us because they're storied vehicles of supreme truth, the most basic important truths of all. By them, people regulate and interpret their lives and find worth and purpose in their existence. Myths put one in touch with sacred realities, the fundamental sources of being, power, and truth, according to Christian theologian Conrad Hayers. If that sounds heavy, that's because it is. Superheroes are inspirational. When a person dresses up as a superhero, the hero they choose is a reflection of who they are. It's part of their identity. There's something within that character that you see in yourself that's also something that you aspire to be. Unlike dressing up like Darth Vader or Michael Myers, each superhero represents something: sacrifice, nobility, truth, justice, and the American way. Though new, by mythological standards, superheroes are deeply ingrained in our society, and that's a major reason why we rush out to see the newest films in theaters. For all the reasons stated earlier, and more, superheroes have a very passionate fan base. Every hero is someone's favorite, and when a mysterious and stupid campaign to appease a phantom audience arises, people get angry, and rightly so. One of the newest and dumbest changes coming to the MCU is the rumor that both Magneto and Professor X are going to be black. Let's dig deeper. Marvel Studios considering making Professor X and Magneto people of color in X-Men reboot. The X-Men could have a unique twist to them when Marvel Studios rolls out their inevitable reboot. Kevin Feige and company are considering having people of color portray both Magneto and Professor X in the MCU. Full Circle Cinema has learned. While the change wouldn't alter much for Charles Xavier, as he was born in New York to a wealthy family, it may lead to Marvel Studios taking some liberties with Eric Lensher's origin. In the pages of the X-Men comics, Magneto was born in the 1920s to a Jewish family. During World War II, Eric was sent to Auschwitz, a Nazi concentration camp. With the current MCU taking place in 2023, it's difficult to imagine a near 100-year-old Magneto taking on the X-Men. Marvel Studios will have to take some steps to differentiate this incarnation of the X-Men from what Fox has done over the better part of 2 decades. Making the two potential leads of the franchise people of color could be a huge step in doing that, as well as helping to push diversity in the MCU forward. Earlier this year, Feige spoke about representation in the MCU and how he believes it's the future of the franchise. So, the notion of representation on screen, in front of and behind the camera, somebody once asked me, so is Black Panther a one-off? And I said, no, it's not a one-off, Feige told The Wrap. This is the future. This is the way the world is, and the way certainly our studio is going to be run going forward, because it brings about better stories. The more diverse group of people making the movie is, the better the stories. Ugh. When the X-Men were to make their live-action debut in the 2000 film, Fox enlisted veteran actors Patrick Stewart and Ian McKellen to tackle the roles of Professor X and Magneto. They would portray the characters until the studio decided to do a soft reboot of the franchise with X-Men First Class, and James McAvoy and Michael Fassbender took over the roles, although McKellen and Stewart would appear again in Days of Future Past alongside their younger counterparts. So obviously this is a terrible idea. My stance on adaptations is, if it looks a certain way, in multiple mediums, then that's how it looks. Period. When you deviate from that, you get a bastardized version that has no reason for existing. But the problem with this Diversity First campaign is more than aesthetic. Magneto is a character that cannot be separated from his origins. Magneto is a Holocaust survivor whose extreme methods and cynical philosophy derive from his determination to protect mutants from suffering a similar fate at the hands of the world that fears and persecutes mutants. Bryan Singer's X-Men portrayed Magneto's origin perfectly. We saw the scene, and in that very moment, we understood his entire worldview. He's much more militant than Professor X. If Professor X is Martin Luther King Jr., then Magneto is Malcolm X. The incoming MCU X-Men film is trying to change Magneto to be a black man. Rumor has it that Denzel Washington is the desired choice. Well, Denzel already played Malcolm X. Once was enough, Marvel. Marvel characters cannot be separated from their origins, and Magneto is no different. The Holocaust is not interchangeable with the civil rights movement or slavery. They're completely different beasts. If the argument for Magneto to be black is that he's too old to be a Holocaust survivor, well, he's definitely too old to be a former slave who suffered injustices firsthand. If he's a child of the civil rights movement, the motivation is not extreme enough. It's not right. It's not Magneto. This is just messing with something that works for the sake of stupidity. No one who actually spends money on Marvel products has never once thought to themselves, X-Men would be a much better property if Magneto was black. It's the same for all the money-spending fans. They're fans of something. They love it. They want more, and they don't expect it to change randomly. People at publications like the Mary Sue aren't fans of these properties. They're fans of ideology that are desperate to appear on the right side of history by championing changes that excite absolutely no one. They're like the face huggers from Alien. They sexually assault your face, impregnate you with terrible ideas, and then burst out of your chest, killing you, and in the process, the thing you love too. Of course, the Mary Sue has to chime in on this topic, and like everything else, they do it poorly. With Marvel's plans for X-Men and Fantastic Four movies completely up in the air, the rumor mill is churning, and one of the rumors going around is that Kevin Feige and co. are considering having people of color portray both Magneto and Professor X. This sounds familiar. Let's jump ahead and see where the opinion piece starts and why it falls apart. Now this might come as a surprise, but I only think this half works. I think making Eric a visibly romantic Jewish man would be super important and in a good way to counter the whitewashing casting fail that is Scarlet Witch/Wanda. Now, quick detour. This is a picture of Scarlet Witch from her very first appearance in X-Men. She's white. I don't see the problem. I think you could also choose a mixed-race Jewish person, but I think it would be important to actually cast someone with Jewish ancestry, which could be someone of any racial group. Again, this is acting. It's fake. David Prowse didn't have the Force, Robert Downey Jr. didn't have the Iron Man technology, and Brie Larson can't fly. What a surprise. As for Charles Xavier, I think he works best as a white guy because of his relationship to power. Charles is a manipulator in many ways, who has taken advantage of young people and turned them into child soldiers. When you read Professor X in the comics, there's a lot of privilege that he has, that I think makes his optimism about human-mutant relationships so viable in his mind. He also has a very colonial mentality, molding these kids into his idea of what it's meant to be a good mutant. What I do think would work better is that if you keep Charles white, but diversify the rest of the X-Men. Scott Summers I can see as a Native American, Jean Grey could be Latina, Beast could be Southeast Asian, etc. I think diverse X-Men is a better goal than a non-white Charles Xavier himself, not to mention the optics of him as a white man running a school of young people of color for his political agenda would be an interesting long-term narrative and highlight Charles's ignorance towards the feelings and issues facing his students. I love diversity in these movies and I want it to happen, but I would like thought to be put into it. While organic diversity is a term that I feel has been weaponized, I do feel like that if you're going to race bend important characters, you need to think about how that would change their mentality and experiences. You want to write a non-white Charles Xavier? Then think about how that would change him and his makeup of the X-Men. Let's not forget about that part of the reason Charles and Magneto have conflict about their methods is because Magneto is a two-time minority. Two-time minority? Is that a thing? That sounds like I'm a two-time Oscar winner. I'm a two-time Emmy winner. Two-time minority? That doesn't make any fucking sense. I don't even know why I'm reading this. Anyway, back to the article before I go nuclear. He is aware that humans already hate other humans, so he cannot believe in some sort of utopia where humans will come to love mutants who are even more different. So if we have a non-white Charles, then we need to understand why he as a person of color who had experienced racism would have that optimism. I'm glad Feige wants more representation, but let's also get some of that behind the scenes in the writer's room. It's not about diversity in the writer's room. It's about who's best for the job. If it's all women who make the best X-Men film, then so be it. Remember, it was a woman who made X-Men the animated series and the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers possible. It was also a woman responsible for all the great voices heard on Batman the Animated Series. Let's just remember that. Jumping back to the stupid article, making the X-Men every color of the rainbow is a terrible idea. As I stated earlier, the way a character is drawn is the way a character should be adapted. It's part of their identity. And as I also stated earlier, each character is someone's favorite. So while you at the Mary Sue don't care, the money-spending audience does. One of my favorite X-Men is Cyclops. Always has been. I love the design, the powers, and the fact that he's stiff as a board because of his leadership duties. I get the character. I've also bought a lot of Cyclops merchandise over the years. If they alter him to appease the diversity goons, I'll flat out stop buying anything based on Cyclops. He's one way. Leave him to be. The same goes for every character listed in the article. I'm opposed to changing all of them. Why? Because it's not the character. The funny thing about the X-Men is that it's already the most diverse cast in comics history. If there was a giant laser pointed at Earth, and the aliens' only demand was a diverse X-Men film, then all they need to do is pick other characters. I don't think anyone wants an adaptation of the early Stan Lee, Jack Kirby comics. They're not the greatest offering from early Marvel. There's a reason why that book was cancelled, and for years, nothing but reprints were re-released. That brings us to the giant-size X-Men team, which is incredibly diverse without being forced. On it you have Storm, who is a black woman, Wolverine, who is a Canadian man, Colossus, who's a Russian man, Cyclops, who's a white man from America, you have Thunderbird, who's a Native American, and Nightcrawler, who has blue fur and is from Germany. That's a pretty diverse team right there. They hit a lot of different colors, ethnicities, and mutations. Remember, these are fictional characters with mutations. So that's a pretty diverse team that no one would complain about. They're iconic X-Men, and with some light tweaking, they can be used for the X introduction into the MCU. If we take the route that I'd like to see, Marvel could give us the Jim Lee team, or the X-Men the Animated Series team. There are a few differences, but we all win either way. On that team we have Jean Grey, who's a redhead, Storm, who's a black woman, Beast, who would be a blue furry mutant at this point, Colossus, again, the Russian man, Gambit, a Cajun, Psylocke, who's Asian, well, a British woman in an Asian body, Rogue, Cyclops, Wolverine, again from Canada, and a whole other slew. We can include Jubilee, she's Asian as well. So if diversity is so important, instead of making the characters that are already one way, just bring in another character that everyone likes, that happens to represent some group, if we need that to happen. I don't think there needs to be a diversity quota in entertainment like these people in Hollywood do. The story should come first. A great story can bring people together and make them realize that they have fewer differences than they thought. Have you ever spent time in a comic book store? You see people from every walk of life coming together to celebrate the things they love. Race, gender, creed, and all other things don't matter. These stories unite the people. That's the message of the X-Men, to break down barriers and remove hate from humanity. The diversity police compartmentalize people and categorize them by race, taking away their humanity and making them a skin color or orientation only. To quote Depeche Mode, people are people. So, why should it be that Marvel takes away the humanity of these characters to look cool in 2019? Race swapping in the X-Men isn't the only place where Marvel is attempting to appease this phantom audience fueled by diversity and hate for white characters. Iron Man is the next victim of this race swapping bullshit, but he's going to be used in a much different, yet more dangerous way than you may think. And we'll cover that next time. We're taking a slight detour today. Initially, we're going to talk about Robert Downey Jr. back in the MCU, even after Tony Stark died. But with all this talk of Spider-Man in the news, I figured now would be the perfect time. Now folks, this is part 2 of a 3-part saga. I'll have a link in the description below for part 1, and after you leave this video, go ahead and check it out. It's pretty good. Spider-Man is Marvel's biggest character. No doubt about it. While Iron Man, Thor, Captain America, Black Widow, and 90% of the characters that make up the MCU were all relegated to the B-list status at best of Marvel, Spider-Man was flying high as Marvel's flagship superhero. From comics to cartoons, video games, and toys, if it was a product, Spider-Man was on it. What Spider-Man wasn't on was a movie screen. As far back as 1977, there was an attempt to bring Spidey to cinemas by taking episodes of the live-action TV show, stitching them together, and selling them as a movie. I actually bought into this as a kid. There was this mythic place known as Blockbuster back in the day that offered these plastic rectangles called VHS tapes, or videos as we called them back then. And this is where I found said Spider-Man movie. The incredibly low budget quality of this film didn't throw me off too much, because this was the 90s, and Marvel movies were crap. This was our Captain America film, and somehow I saw the Fantastic Four back in the day too. Marvel had a much lower threshold for quality than DC did. The only place Marvel was on equal footing was TV. X-Men and Spider-Man were a great 1-2 punch to DC's Batman and Superman. It was all because of messy film rights issues, like James Cameron's Almost Spider-Man film with Arnold Schwarzenegger as Doc Ock, and poor business deals that Spider-Man never saw a big theatrical release. Marvel would leverage film rights to stay afloat during trying financial times, and never thought about the future ramifications. This saw their properties divided among a multitude of studios. That's why Spider-Man was from Sony, X-Men from Fox, the Hulk from Universal, and Howard the Duck from Hell. All the DC films came from Warner Brothers, and the WB was able to make the DC heroes, well, let's be honest, they were able to make Batman into the biggest hero of that decade. It wasn't until 2002 when Spider-Man finally hit the big screen. The Sam Raimi trilogy, as it became known, went on to make over $2 billion at the box office and cement Spider-Man as the superhero of the 21st century. You'd think that after decades of production issues, once Spider-Man found that winning formula, they'd keep the momentum going. Well, greed knows no bounds, and of course Hollywood screwed it up. The reboot no one asked for, The Amazing Spider-Man, was released just 5 short years after Spider-Man 3. While fairly successful, everyone was talking about the Avengers that year and why Spider-Man should have been a part of that film. 2 years later, we got the cinematic abortion known as The Amazing Spider-Man 2, and it was only then that Sony had a come-to-Jesus moment. To get us all caught up, let's check out what Cinema Blend had to say. As early as December 2014, a mere 7 months after The Amazing Spider-Man 2's release, conversations between Sony and Marvel Studios were rumored to have taken place. Thanks to this massive email hack that hit the studio around that time, those rumors were verified. It took some initial stumbling and negotiations, but in 2015, Spider-Man was confirmed to be entering the MCU with a debut appearance in Captain America: Civil War. Casting Tom Holland as a teenage Peter Parker, 5 films featuring Spider-Man would come out of this partnership between 2016 and the present, 2 of them being solo efforts. Between the 3 Avengers movies as well as Spider-Man: Homecoming and Far From Home, the Holland films have made more than an estimated $8 billion in the worldwide marketplace. Let me stop there real quick. That's a little fishy at best. I wouldn't call the Avengers movies Spider-Man films and give Tom Holland the credit. So this seems like a nice history lesson. But how is this a problem? The last video covered something that's really an issue with the MCU. Well, friends, just last month, that deal between Sony and Marvel fell apart. Did the Marvel Cinematic Universe just lose Spider-Man? Fans reel at the Sony-Disney split. And this comes from the New York Times. Even Spider-Man's webs were not strong enough to hold Sony and Disney together. After months of negotiations over the terms of their partnership on the film franchise, Sony announced on Tuesday that Kevin Feige, who helped steer Disney's Marvel Studios and its Avengers series to immense global success, will no longer play a role in the next live-action Spider-Man movie starring Tom Holland. The news alarmed fans of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, who fear that future big-screen installments of the linked superhero stories would be weakened or even thrown into plot chaos, without friendly relations between Sony, which owned the rights to Spider-Man, and Disney, who owns the rest of the Avengers. Could the MCU go on without your friendly neighborhood web-slinger? Sony put the onus for Mr. Feige's departure squarely on Disney. We are disappointed, but respect Disney's decision to have him continue as a lead producer, the company said on Twitter. The news comes after Disney had pushed for better financial terms from Sony, which purchased movie rights to Spider-Man before Disney bought Marvel Comics and its intellectual property. Before the movie starring Mr. Holland as the teenage superhero in the Avengers universe, 2 previous Sony series featuring Tobey Maguire and later Andrew Garfield existed in a time and place when no mention of Captain America, Iron Man, Thor, the Hulk, or other characters who became global phenomenons for Marvel and Disney in 23 movies over 11 years with $22 billion in ticket sales. To be fair, they did mention Doctor Strange and Spider-Man 2. After some of those characters ended their arcs at Avengers Endgame this year, fans pinned their hopes for future storylines on the hints found in Spider-Man: Far From Home, which raked in $1 billion this summer, and positioned Spider-Man as the heir to the Avengers mantle. But there are already signs that the future of the Marvel Universe would not rest solely on Spidey's shoulders. In July, Marvel Studios unveiled the next phase of its plans, including a collection of movies and TV shows featuring Thor, Doctor Strange, Black Widow, and other popular characters, but no Spider-Man. I'd like to stop right there and call bullshit. They were definitely setting up Spider-Man to be the lead of the MCU. We all saw Spider-Man: Far From Home, and they symbolically made Spider-Man the next Tony Stark. If you believe otherwise, I have a bridge to sell you and some videotapes that can be yours for just 1 penny apiece. In all seriousness, there's a scramble for the next Spider-Man, which is impossible. The character has been out for almost 60 years, and the alternatives that some websites are pushing is just crazy talk. 10 teenage heroes who could replace Spider-Man in the MCU. Number 10, Kate Bishop. Number 9, Shuri from Black Panther. Number 8, Squirrel Girl. Number 7, Iron Lad. Number 6, Nova. Number 5, Miss Marvel. Number 4, The X-Men. Number 3, Johnny Storm. Number 2, Amadeus Cho. Number 1, Ironheart. We'll talk more about her next time. Lists like this make me laugh because it tells me one thing. These people don't get it. I mean, seriously. A bunch of Z-list characters are going to replace Spider-Man? Okay. Let's have Super Dave replace Mickey Mouse. Let's have Clutch Cargo replace Cartman from South Park. Do these people even read the damn books? Do they know who Spider-Man actually is? I mean, topics like this, they make me laugh. This is insane. Let me go back a moment and have another laugh. But before I do, let's see who wrote this shit. J. Richland Anderson. Sounds like a Costco brand or a railroad tycoon. So again, we're looking at characters like Ironheart, Amadeus Cho. We already have a Hulk in the MCU. Yeah, his arm's messed up, but do we need another one? Realistically, isn't that going to confuse people? I mean, we all bought in that Dr. Bruce Banner was pelted by gamma rays and turned into the Hulk. But we have another Hulk? Now it's kind of getting stupid, just like in the books. Johnny Storm, we don't have a Fantastic Four yet, and we don't know if Marvel's going to be able to do it just right. Now, the X-Men are awesome, but I don't think they fill the hole left by Spider-Man. Miss Marvel, we're not even going to get into her. Look, this character is not very popular. They'll tell you she is, but she's kind of weird, and she's getting her own TV show. Awesome. But you tell me that a character created within the last 5 years is going to surpass Spider-Man, the brand icon, the Mickey Mouse of Marvel? No. Be honest down in the chat. I don't care what your agenda is. Do you really think this character is going to replace Spider-Man and the billions of dollars that Spider-Man brings in? No, it is not. Nova, yes, he's in Guardians of the Galaxy, well, the Nova Corps is, but I highly doubt they're going to go and replace Spider-Man. Iron Lad, you've never heard of him. Squirrel Girl, damn joke. Shuri, she's part of the Black Panther. People like her. She's not going to be as popular as Spider-Man. People are going to go, who? Kind of like that Star-Lord moment. And finally, Kate Bishop, she's going to be in the Hawkeye TV show. But if you honestly think that Spider-Man is going to be replaced by some woman with a bow and arrow in terms of popularity and cultural relevance, well, let's talk another time. Actually, let's not. So these people just think that the teenage aspect is all Spider-Man is about, right? It shows what they know. These are the types of people that keep Spider-Man uninteresting and stop the character from reaching the full potential. I know, I'm a Spider-Man fan, forgive me. I've spent a lot of time reading the books, watching the shows, movies, etc. It's all my fault for expecting more out of people. In reality, all I expect for them is to crack open a comic or watch the spectacular Spider-Man. Then they'll understand the character. The cultural value of Spider-Man can't be interchanged with any other comic book character. Superman himself cannot replace Spider-Man's cultural worth. I know it sounds grandiose, but these characters are our American myths. To be fair, they're beyond that. They're universal in their appeal. And some fly-by-night jabroni who's age-appropriate can't fill the gap left by Spider-Man. That's another bonus Marvel problem that the publishing arm of the company faces. They don't respect the iconic characters. They figure they're interchangeable and people will buy the books because they say Marvel. Newsflash, people stop buying the books because they say Marvel. The comic arm of the brand is a cesspool no one wants. The writers are producing crap, the art is mostly as good as always, and the editors are just not customer-friendly. Any hardships they face will be brought upon themselves, and the decline in Marvel properties moving forward will be because they chose to adapt the last 5 years of the brand. The worst Marvel has ever had to offer. So you're probably asking yourself, what is the actual Spider-Man situation? We already know how important Spider-Man is, Jeff. I'm glad you do. The Spider-Man situation has been convoluted at best. There's reporting biases, people are coming to the defense of a company because they made them happy as a kid. It's all a big mess. Surprisingly, our friend Scott Mendelson has a pretty fair assessment of the situation. Spider-Man. Sony and Marvel no longer need each other. Spider-Man Far From Home arrives on digital HD this morning, following a robust theatrical run. That made it Sony's third biggest domestic gross ever. Yes, Sony needs Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends as an ongoing film franchise, but do they need Marvel for Spider-Man to soar accordingly? The simple facts of this Sony-Marvel divorce is that it made sense for Sony to maintain the current terms, but less sense for Sony to agree to Disney's terms. That's not to paint Disney as the villain here, even though they are, as the alleged deal, depending on who you ask, 30 to 50% of the production budget in exchange for 30 to 50% of the profits, wasn't money for nothing. But considering how reliant Sony is on the profits from their Spider-Verse movies, yes, Amazing Spider-Man made up 19% of their 2012 grosses, while Venom and Spider-Verse represented 47% of their 2018 grosses. It's a calculated risk that 100% profits from an MCU-less Spider-Man series is worth more than 50 to 70% of the profits from an affiliated Spider-Man series. Sony has shown via Spider-Man Far From Home and Spider-Man Homecoming that it can make, with Kevin Feige's help, a well-reviewed and well-received Peter Parker movie. Sony has shown via Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse that it can make a critically adored, crowd-pleasing, and Oscar-winning Spider-Man movie without Marvel's help. Venom shows that Sony can pull off an $856 million grossing spin-off despite lousy reviews without the MCU brand. Sure, we shouldn't expect Morbius to pull in that kind of money next summer. Even if Spider-Man 3 Homeless only earns Amazing Spider-Man money, that would be great on an over-under budget of $170 million. I have long argued that the biggest problem with the Amazing Spider-Man movies was their budget. Yes, I hated The Amazing Spider-Man. It was a grimdark remake of the Sam Raimi original, and liked The Amazing Spider-Man 2 more than you, save for the fans, Gwen Stacy's murder, which killed off the franchise's most popular character. But Sony spent $235 million on Amazing Spider-Man in 2012, right between the $225 million Avengers and the $250 million Dark Knight Rises, and $255 million for The Amazing Spider-Man 2 in 2014. Sony was in a different place in late 2014. They had just been hacked and their private emails spread all over the internet. A massive cybercrime that was treated by the media with all the seriousness of a slumber party prank. They had taken a hit when The Amazing Spider-Man 2 was poorly reviewed and had flatlined in North America, which capsized their alleged plans for a multi-pronged Spider-Man cinematic universe. Marvel was doing fine, but the media was treating Avengers Age of Ultron's billion-dollar gross like a failure, which didn't help. Marvel didn't need Spider-Man, but he was a nice bonus boost to Phase 3, which would be more dependent on new franchises. Spider-Man's inclusion in the MCU helped rejuvenate the brand for Sony. Moreover, Parker's inclusion into Captain America Civil War, and especially the Avengers Infinity War, was a key variable in those films' respective blockbuster success. If we concede that Sony now doesn't need the Marvel brand to get folks to show up for a Spider-Man movie, especially if it's well-liked as Homecoming, Venom, and the Spider-Verse, and Far From Home, we must also concede that Marvel doesn't need Spider-Man. Iron Man, Spidey's main connection to the MCU, is dead, and Feige has gone on record several times stating that Captain Marvel would be the new leader/focal point going forward. That'll put butts in seats. If Marvel can keep knocking out bigger hits with the likes of the Eternals and Shang-Chi, they don't really need Spider-Man anymore than they did in the first 8 years of the MCU. And if Sony can trust the audience to show up for a Spider-Man movie, or a Spider-Man-related film, without an explicit connection to the MCU, if anything, Far From Home's mid-credit cliffhanger is the perfect cutoff for Peter's palling around with the Avengers. The disconnect can allow Holland's Spidey to escape from Iron Man's shadow, while the lack of Spider-Man will only force Marvel to double down on new franchises. The short-lived partnership was mutually beneficial when both companies needed a pick-me-up. Yes, Marvel would have been fine with only Black Panther popping up in Civil War, but Spider-Man sure as hell helped. Sony may well be okay with a $160 million budgeted Amazing Spider-Man 3, but the reboot they got with Marvel's help worked like a charm. But Sony can make a decent blockbuster superhero movie without the Marvel brain trust, and Marvel has both a deluge of untapped characters and a track record of making A-level movie stars out of C-list characters. Fans may want Sony and Marvel to get back together, but it was a relationship of mutual convenience that has outlived its usefulness. So now's the part where I get to tell you what I think. The best Spider-Man films came from Sony. The worst Spider-Man films came from Sony. Obviously, Spider-Man 1 and 2 are fantastic, but from Spider-Man 3 through the Amazing series, Spider-Man was a joke. It epitomized corporate greed, ineptitude, and all-around bad filmmaking. It wasn't until I saw Into the Spider-Verse that my faith was restored in Sony. Into the Spider-Verse was so fresh, so fun, and so beautiful that I completely forgot about Spider-Man Far From Home, a film that I genuinely enjoyed and couldn't wait to see the next installment of. I think Into the Spider-Verse showed me that there can be a great film based on a comic book that doesn't feel as manufactured as some of the MCU films. Looking back on the MCU as a whole, I don't retroactively hate the films just because I hated how Endgame turned out and lament the future of the series. I feel that the MCU was the greatest cinematic comic achievement, but I never felt they did Spider-Man justice. The movies felt like slightly tighter versions of an Andrew Garfield film. Instead of dark and gritty, we got goofy and stupid. Yeah, Spider-Man is a lighthearted character overall, but they completely erased the gravitas from the character. There's no Uncle Ben, no power and or responsibility. Just a kid with superpowers that has no real-world problems outside of getting the girl. Everything that made Spider-Man was wiped away. Yes, he made jokes, but if you want an asshole in a red suit with little substance and one-liners galore, well, go watch Deadpool 2. There's so much more to the character of Spider-Man that Disney left out, and you know what? Sony did it better. Go back and watch Spider-Man 1 and 2. That feeling you get in the pit of your stomach when Peter walks away from Mary Jane in the cemetery just because he knows she'll be in danger if they're together is exactly the dour yet heroic ending of the best Spider-Man comics. The scene when Peter gives up what he wants for himself because he's the hero, that's Spider-Man. When Miles found out his uncle is the Prowler and then dies in his arms only for his dad to discover his body, that's Spider-Man. Sitting on a bus and accidentally calling in a drone strike because you're wearing Iron Man sunglasses, that isn't Spider-Man. Letting everyone know your secret identity for the sake of a last-minute joke, well, that isn't Spider-Man either. Whatever Disney produced in those two solo films, that's not Spider-Man. And I, for one, am happy that it's over. Welcome to part 3 of our MCU saga, The Marvel Problem. If you're one of the thousands who've joined the channel since part 1, welcome and thank you. And make sure you check out the other 2 parts for better context in regards to this video. The MCU is the greatest cinematic experiment in history. Period. No matter if you love it or hate it, it's been a huge hit. Conversely, no matter if you love it or hate it, it's over. Spiritually, the MCU has ended with the death of Iron Man. Almost daily, we're bombarded with articles proclaiming the MCU has a brighter future than it has a present, and that diversity will save the MCU. First off, no, and secondly, no. Initially, I wanted to cover Robert Downey Jr. being used to sell the Black Widow film and how Ironheart is a crap character with no justifications for existing. But then our old friend Captain Marvel popped back up in the news, and I felt like this was the perfect time to cover an issue that may affect the Walt Disney Company moving forward. Captain Marvel has been the hottest topic ever on this channel. You may think, but Jeff, what about Star Wars? Well, yes, Star Wars was huge for us. But we got 1 million views on a Captain Marvel video in 4 days. That was a new lap record. The mere mention of Captain Marvel or Brie Larson garnered an instant 100,000 views, no matter the channel size. While most were focusing on the comments that belittled the majority of the MCU fanbase, here on this channel we were focused on the quality of the film. and behind the scenes, wondering about the discrepancy in tickets and non-attendance. We'll get into that ticketing issue a little later on, because it's getting heated with lawsuits and fraud accusations. But for a moment, let's get caught up on the current Captain Marvel news. There's a rumor going around, and as always on this channel, I stress a rumor, that Disney is losing confidence in Captain Marvel as a viable replacement as lead of the MCU. Well, Disney, welcome to the real world where everybody has been saying the same damn thing for months. It's funny how these companies work. They force something down your throat, attack you if you question it, and then slowly backtrack when the chips are down. Let's jump over to Epic Stream for the story. Disney might be losing confidence in Brie Larson as Captain Marvel. Brie Larson may be set to appear in more Marvel Cinematic Universe films, but it looks like Disney is no longer confident about the Academy Award winner's future projects. A new report claims that the House of Mouse is already reconsidering pushing forward with Captain Marvel's role in the MCU. The surprising revelation comes from YouTube channel Overlord DVD, Hail Doomcock, where they claim that Disney was actually planning to use Spider-Man to make Larson's Carol Danvers more likable. Unfortunately, with Spidey being taken back by Sony, the plans are falling apart.
Disney is having Brie Larson fatigue, and they have lost confidence in her and the direction they are moving with Captain Marvel, they said.
That's Doomcock's voice.
Marvel had plans for Captain Marvel, but those plans were utterly derailed by the loss of Spider-Man to Sony.
They go on to state that Disney is
Stuck with a rigid, unlikable hero with no personality that they have plans to continue with. Disney is losing confidence in Captain Marvel and may be slowly starting to realize that alienating your fanbase isn't the best way to run a business.
It's a bold claim, considering that Larson is still signed on for 5 more movies with Marvel Studios, although there is a possibility that Disney wanted to team Captain Marvel up with Spider-Man. The whole Brie Larson fatigue has not yet been confirmed. With that in mind, it's best to take this with a grain of salt. Now again, this is just a rumor, but let's play the hypothetical game where the points don't matter and we act like this could happen. If Disney has in fact lost faith in Captain Marvel as a viable MCU lead, then they're finally awake. It's kind of bizarre how they were pushing and thrusting this crap at us like, buy it or die. I hadn't seen a company pull that card since, well, Disney themselves after Star Wars dove into the commode, or the toilet for the layperson. You know, it's funny. There are a lot of parallels between Captain Marvel and Disney's Star Wars. Yes, they made money, but they caused a rift in the fandom and failed miserably in the toy aisle. When it comes to Star Wars toys, I always have footage to show. And thankfully, I have some for Captain Marvel crap too. Monkeys, hit the music! So this footage comes from our good friend Salvador. You can see he's at his local Target. And there's a plethora of Marvel Legends figures. A lot of wasps. But that's not why we're here. There she is, the main event, Captain Marvel. And if you look closely, that little yellow tag means Captain Marvel's on clearance. Half price. And people still weren't buying it. Oh well, but the movie's great, they say. Over here, again, on clearance, we have Captain Marvel the doll. Doesn't look like little girls want the role-play stuff either, or the doll. It's funny, you market a film at a female audience that just doesn't buy it. You market it at a male audience that just doesn't buy it. As you can see, these things are marked down to $9 from $12.88, which is still $9 too much in my opinion. Thankfully, there's only one shelf. Oh wait, they're stacked at the top as well. You can never say Target is out of anything. Or is this a Walmart? This might be Walmart. I'm wrong. Over here, we have more clearance. More Captain Marvel. What a surprise! No, it's not a surprise. This was just as expected. Now this is some footage I shot on my own. And as you can see here, we have a giant display of Disney clearance. In some footage I shot more recently, you'll still find a lot of Disney clearance. It's like they flooded the market and people just didn't buy or care. Again, more Incredibles stuff. And this isn't a dig at the Incredibles. I think the first one's a great film. Best Fantastic Four film we ever got. But nobody's buying the Disney stuff right now. Now, I show these because these are the Marvel Rising dolls, and you get Squirrel Girl, and she's on clearance as well. Only at Target. Well, it'll remain only at Target because it's not going home with anybody. But here we have Daisy Johnson, Marvel's Quake, which I don't know that character, and America Chavez, a character most people don't know or give a damn about because she's a dumb character. But hey, she's going to replace Spider-Man because of reasons people say on the internet. Now here we go, we have more traditional Marvel Legends stuff, and this is a very nicely stocked section. Now you have all kinds of stuff, but you still have Captain Marvel. People still weren't picking her up. And, rightly so. We always jokingly call Rey the face of a dying franchise. Well, this is the smug face of a misstep of epic proportions. So that was nice and reassuring that Captain Marvel didn't catch on with the kids. What I'm not so sure about is the billion-dollar number for Captain Marvel ticket sales. A few months back, anytime you mentioned that Captain Marvel tickets even smelled a bit like Brie Larson, you were met with the claim that you were a conspiracy theorist, or the dreaded sexist claim. By the way, that accusation has lost all of its flavor, like old gum or MTV. To catch you up, let's go back to the beginning of the year and see what actually went on. So you can see that sweetening the numbers is a real practice in entertainment, and it's no secret. If a company as public as Sprint and a figure like Jay-Z can do it, anyone can. And with all the companies Disney owns, anything is possible. If we can go back to one of our earlier Captain Marvel videos, we discussed the free Captain Marvel tickets with a $50 purchase at American Eagle Outfitters. You didn't even have to ask, you just automatically received them. The promotion was run through Fandango, which is the same company that owns Rotten Tomatoes, which is the genesis of all this controversy. Someone, Fandango, had to pre-buy those tickets, which adds on to the opening box office and can account for the empty seats. If people never claimed their seats, Disney still got paid, which is the bottom line in all of this. There was also the story about how fans couldn't get refunds for Captain Marvel.
Coincidence?
If we can go back to late 2017, we find one of Disney's many strong-arm tactics at play. Remember the Last Jedi theater requirements? They were a bit steep and angered a lot of small business owners, the same ones big corporations would like to make disappear. Business Insider had this to say: movie theaters can now show The Last Jedi only if they agree that Disney gets 65% of ticket sale revenue, which is the largest cut a studio has ever asked for from theaters. They also had to show the movie in their largest auditoriums for at least a week. Ignoring these terms would lead to Disney charging the theater an additional 5%, so that means Disney would take 70% of the sales. It all gets murkier the more you look at Captain Marvel's swirl of hype, and Disney doesn't want that to hurt the Avengers, so they're changing the narrative with distractions. So even as early as March, the numbers didn't add up. There was a level of confusion associated with this film that hadn't been seen in the MCU. Again, we were called all sorts of terrible things for even thinking that Disney may have pulled something funky. But one thing they didn't call us was right. About a month ago, news that Disney's finances weren't on the up and up came out, and due to the fact that I was hospitalized, and no, I can't blame Disney no matter how much I'd like to, I wasn't able to cover this story. Disney whistleblower told SEC that the company inflated revenue for years. A former Walt Disney accountant says she has filed a series of whistleblower tips with the Securities and Exchange Commission, alleging the company has materially overstated revenue for years. Sandra Kuba, formerly a senior financial analyst in Disney's revenue operating department who worked for the company for 18 years, alleges that employees working in the parks and resorts business segment systematically overstated revenue by billions of dollars by exploiting weaknesses in the company's accounting software. Kuba said she had met with officials from the SEC on several occasions to discuss allegations. A spokeswoman for the SEC declined to comment. A Disney spokesperson said the company had reviewed the whistleblower's claims and found that they were utterly without merit. Kuba's whistleblower filings, which have been reviewed by MarketWatch, outline several ways employees allegedly boosted revenue, including recording fictitious revenue for complimentary golf rounds for free guest promotions. Another alleged action Kuba described in her SEC filing involved recording revenue for $500 gift cards at their face value even when guests paid a discounted rate of $395. Kuba also alleged that employees sometimes recorded revenue twice for gift cards, both when guests bought the gift card and when it was used at a resort. Sometimes revenue was recorded even though a gift card was given to a guest for free following a customer complaint. For instance, according to the whistleblower's allegations, Kuba's filings allege that flaws in the accounting software made the manipulation difficult to trace, though the consequence could be significant. In just one financial year, 2008 to 2009, Disney's annual revenue could have been overstated by as much as $6 billion, the filings allege. The Parks and Resorts business segment reported the revenue of $10.6 billion in 2009, according to its annual filing reports with the SEC. Kuba told MarketWatch she first reported the alleged revenue recognition issues to management in 2013 and said no one responded to her at the time. She said that escalated her concerns to a more senior executive in 2016, that Disney's corporate audit group contacted her once in November of 2016, but never followed up. She said she brought her concerns to the SEC in August of 2017. She was fired from Disney a month later. So that's a lot to digest, and to the ardent Disney defenders, it's just not enough to go on. They'll say it's just an accusation with no merit. Well, the story doesn't end there. A few days ago, at the time of this recording, there was new information as a former attorney general began to look into the case. Former Louisiana Attorney General Charles Foti has begun an investigation into the allegations brought against Disney by whistleblower Sandra Cuba, a former employee who claims that Disney falsely inflated revenue reports for 18 years. On September 9th, less than a month after Cuba's reports were received by the SEC, former Attorney General of Louisiana, Charles C. Foti Jr., of the law firm Kahn, Swick & Foti, LLC, announced that he would be initiating an investigation into whether Disney's officers and/or directors breached their fiduciary duties to Disney's shareholders or otherwise violated state or federal laws. Following the announcement of the investigation, two former Disney employees publicly discussed their alleged experiences with Disney's fraudulent accounting processes. One employee described how one project was a complete disaster and they marketed it as profitable, though the employee notes that his knowledge regarding the topic is hearsay and that they have zero proof of anything. Another employee, who has since deleted a relevant tweet from their account, stated that, "When I was asked about certain monies being created that didn't really exist, well, let's just say I never got answers." KFS is currently asking for assistance from the public and long-term Disney shareholders in their investigation, encouraging anyone with relevant information to contact them. The plot is thickening, and I, for one, will be following this story very closely. The original article states that the tampering was in regards to the theme parks, but because of the way the earnings are reported, they could be lying about the movie division too. What concerns me more than anything is Disney's actions moving forward. The public at large isn't aware of how Disney allegedly operates. My question is, will they pull something similar with Star Wars Episode 9? Is the need to appear on the right side of the culture war that much more important than honestly reporting your earnings? I'm just asking. The access media will try to brush these things aside and further their narrative for free tickets to Disneyland. That probably got reported as pine sol for bathrooms or something. Who knows? I usually like to end these things with a serious question or a cliffhanger, but let's end today's video with a laugh. Brie Larson recently appeared in the Between the Two Ferns movie on Netflix and had a few terse, albeit scripted words with Zach Galifianakis.
You won Best Actress. Have you ever thought of aiming higher and trying to win Best Actor?
Yeah.
Good question.
It is good. It's thought-provoking.
Your superhero character is called Captain Marvel. Well, they really have stopped trying, haven't they? I mean, why don't they just call it Captain Comic Book or Captain We Can't Think of Anything Else?
And what would your superhero name be? Captain Crunch?
How old were you when you got your first period?
So what do you think about Disney possibly losing interest in Captain Marvel? I shouldn't say interest, I should say faith. Faith is a lot stronger than interest. I, for one, wouldn't be surprised if this was the case, but remember, this is just a rumor that we're reporting on. It's all hearsay until something is confirmed, and when it's confirmed, well, we'll be on the scene to report it. But for now, I just want to know what you think. Would you like this to be true? Do you think it's true? Whatever your answer is, let me know in the comments below. Or, let me know how you guys feel about the Disney filing. I'm not really the biggest financial guy in the world. I like money. I have some of it. I keep it in a jar on my refrigerator. Bonus points if you can tell me what movie that's from. But in all seriousness, there's a weird smell coming from Disney. Everything just seems so manufactured, so fake. Happiest place on earth, my ass, okay? If this comes out to be true, as of now it's just allegations, well, I think it'll show Disney's true colors for a lot of things. Will it turn fans off? Probably not, because the masses are stupid. But if the information's out there, well, then anyone can discover it and form their own opinion. So form your own opinion of this video by giving us a thumbs up and sharing us all over social media. If you're a super fan of this channel and you want more content like this all the time, stuff that we can't put on YouTube, well, join us over on Patreon. Patreon.com/worldclassbs. Over there, we have multiple tiers from $1 to $5, which is only 17 cents a day, all the way up to $25 a month. And you get different perks at different levels. You can get bonus podcasts, you can be on the show, you can recommend things, you can get access to exclusive videos, things we film on location that are made possible because of the contributions here on Patreon. But if that's not your thing, join our Facebook community. We're over on Facebook, as I just said, because of the Facebook community, the redundancy department is being, redundant. But we have a group as well, and it's a lot of fun. You can make friends. The WCBS community is amazing, and I'm not just saying that because people listen to the show. Realistically, it's great. It's supportive, it's fun, and most importantly, you'll learn a little bit about something. So folks, that's it for today from me. I hope you enjoyed part 3 of this originally planned trilogy. Now it'll probably be a 4-parter. We'll see how things go. But in the meantime, do me the one thing I always ask, and if you're new, you're like, what does this guy want? I watched this video. And if you've been here a while, still love you, and you know what the words are. Go out into the world and be excellent to each other.